I did a whole research a month ago, the Chat GPT's like deep research thing, where I literally grabbed every major brand that was marketing between 2006 to 2012. And I said, I want you to do a research project for me on how messaging shifted pre, during, and post 2008 recession. And it came back to me with some really relevant information. And what it basically said was like certain legacy brands focused on nostalgia because they knew that, hey, they're not going to change their prices because they can't. And then the brands that could change their prices, they focused on value and they upped their value. And so like I'm like, okay. And then I start to examine the D2C brands I work with. And I'm like, okay, this brand has more of a legacy than this brand. And then I go start to like kind of move down from there. And then my messaging shifts based on that.
And now, let's take a listen to the Scalability School podcast. Welcome to episode 2 of the Scalability School podcast. I'm Andrew Foxwell, and I'm glad to be here with my friends Dave Herman, special guest, flashing
Hello.
red lights. We're so happy to have you. And of course, Zach and Brad are here with us as well. Fellas, what's up?
Snow day.
Was that a police chase reference? Is that what that was?
Did you see how I did kind of seal that in?
Like I actually caught it pretty well.
Right, right.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, but LA right now is the highest police chases in the first quarter of any year in recorded history this year. So we've had a lot of good stuff lately.
We did tell you we were going to be talking about your tweets. We didn't say which ones. But,
Good news.
Entire podcast about police chases. Our personal favorites. The thing that I have a really hard time with, like, but also love is the balls that some of these people have. Just
Oh
like,
my gosh.
you know what? Like, I'm taking this 96 Caravan. I'm freaking going over the median, you know, and you're like, wow, like that's like,
why we watch them.
you
don't
know,
know.
bravery, really.
I mean, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, yes, terrible things happen that get on, and we don't talk about those, but like the ones where it's like no one gets hurt, but they do some damage to the city. Like, hey, you know what? Like, take out a couple of telephone poles, but they're cool. Like, hey, it's drama, it's action. You don't need a movie. Just turn that.
Yeah.
You know. So anyway.
Well, we're so glad to honestly be here to talk about with you creative velocity, creative systems, you know, obviously a hot topic. There's so many of us that, I mean, we all have revolving discussions around this. I think, as always, our promise on this podcast is to share tactical, real shit that's happening that you're going to be able to use. And is our second thing is to make it feel like you're just listening in a conversation with friends, not a lot of like podcast speak and I don't know, sort of the overproduced stuff that you hear in other places. So that's why we're here. So, David, we have a lot of things that we could talk about. One is about the tweet that you have talking about, and I'll read a selection of this tweet real briefly, which is, this was from, let's see, when was it from specifically? This is from January 28th. Diverse creative isn't ad headlines, it's concepts, carousel, statics, it's mashup, it's funny / serious content, it's TikTok style reply, it's founder led, it's everything, and everything your feed shows you. More is better. And you said, I've explored brands big and small. I've seen what works and doesn't, but this is really what moves scale for a lot of brands. Your costs need to go into hiring creators, agencies that can do this, and then people like, producers and project managers who can work with strategists and media buyers to get what they need on a regular basis, which, I think we really identified with this because this is like a huge part of our thesis of what we all believe too, and how we've seen this work. So one, creative, I guess creative systems, what do yours look like? Or what are the creative systems that you're privy to look like in a lot of these brands?
Yeah, I think there's the similarities and there's differences between all of them depending on a lot of things, but primarily the brands that are in sort of that 7 to 8K or 7 to 8 mid range. I would say that what we find is twofold. One is a mix of outside creative agencies, and then a mix of in-house editors that can kind of take a lot of that footage and mash up and do a bunch of different things with them. That's typically how we've seen it primarily work the best. There was a post I saw about like percentage of your ad spend that's dedicated towards creative. I honestly have never really looked at it that way. Personally, I've always go for it.
I'm curious. So a couple things I think we should talk about. Like, we're kind of jumping ahead. I know we have a few things that we want to ask you, David, but like,
Yeah.
one thing that I'd be really curious on is how you think about like the team, especially for like a 7, 8, 9 figure brand. Like, one thing that I've thought a lot about as we've started building the brands and the brand set outside of Homestead is, how do I build the team and what is like the best way to hire, and like who do I hire first? So like I'll just share really briefly like how I've thought about it, but I think that's so important because it's like, do I go hire editors? Do I go hire a creative strategist? Do I go hire a head of something or whatever? Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, I literally just started with a designer because I'm like, statics are the easiest thing to do. We can pump out the most volume. We're just gonna like roll with a designer to start. And that was our first year. We literally had a designer. We had no editors besides utilizing Homestead and the team there, but like in-house, that was all we had. Then we brought in like a head of creative strategy, and then that person brought in some editors. And then we could finally actually start like adding some video output internally. And now we're trying to really figure out and like scale that up more. But I think like we're getting the size now where it's like mid 8 figure brand, 9 figure brand kind of team. But I think the most important part is like how these 7 and 8 figure, small 8 figure brands are building the team, figuring out who to hire versus agency. Like,
Yeah.
what is the best playbook for that of like who they bring into the team from
So
what you've seen?
yeah. So I'll speak at least from our side of things. So one of the guys that works with me, I kind of trained him on creative strategy in house. I was like, what ended up happening was we'd come into these brands where it would just be like the operator and maybe like either a CMO or somebody that nobody had time to focus on the creative. So we're just like, all right, we're just going to take that on. And what we did was, we would just do these 2 week sprints. Like, we're not going to do creative strategy every single week. There's no reason to at that level of spend. It's every 2 week sprint. So that was number one, like having a creative strategist that came on board to help, that was also just someone who lived in the ad account with me, and kind of saw the differences in what creative worked, what didn't, why it worked, whatnot. But typically what I would always go is, I would start with some type of video editor that would take a lot of our existing footage, either it be through an archive, that app, or it would be taking, just like the in-house teams, just B-roll footage, and just starting there. First off, like that's what we would start with, and from there, we would go into the designer role, which, funny enough, it feels like it's kind of moving towards the AI route. In fact, I just got off a call with my engineering friend, who I'm like, hey, I sent him like a couple of those tweets that were going out, and I was like, how much would it cost just to build this internally? He's like, I could do it for 5K, and he's like, I'll do it for 5K. I'm like, okay, and then he's like, you're just paying for the API token, that's it. So he literally is building it for me this weekend because I'm like,
Is this like
I
an
don't know,
icon kind of type of thing? Like, is that kind of what you're trying to do, or more like a
so
mix of
I'm
like
just like,
GPT?
I want to basically grab my brand deck, my brand guide, and have it own that particular process for that one client, and know this is the font, this is the text, this is the way that the text goes. Just basically tell it the JSON of our brand, but do it in a way where an editor, it's basically like it's my editor and it knows everything. It knows the brand Bible. And then essentially, like, I want to be able to input my top 10 best performing ads last week and have it make 10 new versions of that right now. And that's what I'm having him build. Like, I kind of feel like seems like there's a lot more stuff going on over there. So like, I just want a bare bones thing that I can do just this.
Yep. Yep.
So he's
Simplicity.
building that
So
for me. Yeah. So,
so
but
back to that. So you were like, okay,
Yeah.
video editor to start, where you're basically
Yes.
briefing this video editor. Ideally, you'd be able to like, these brands are likely hiring someone like yourself, a freelancer, an
Yeah.
agency that can help with the
Yeah.
briefing. Ideally, now, I think from my perspective, if you're hiring someone to run your ad account, they should be helping brief creative, let alone like help with this to some degree. So
Yeah.
otherwise, I think it's like it's really hard for these brands to be able to afford even the freelancer if they're not helping with that component. So anyways, okay, that's where you're at. So video editors start, then what's next?
Video editors start. So then once we start to kind of crack that sort of like initial nugget of like, hey, we're seeing concepts that work with this sort of mashups, then we go to the next phase, which is, hey, we actually need someone to film the content. Because it gets to a point that we've seen, especially when you're increasing spend, that this is not going to be somebody that's usually an in-house person. It's going to probably be an agency, from my perspective. So what we'll do is I work with a bunch of different agencies. I work with one that's super nimble, that doesn't have like a flat price. It's like, hey, they're just going to work with me on, I'll just basically say, here's what I need from you. And then they'll come back to me and say, like, all right, that'll be like $250 a video. I'm like, okay, you can do that. So then they'll go get the content from me and we'll start there. That typically starts with a colleague of mine. His name's Joel. He'll go out and get creators to go make content for us. And then part of that, we get whitelisting access to the creator, but we also get their raw files. So what they'll do is they'll shoot the videos raw. They'll send them to us without any music on them, any text overlay, just so we have that footage. So that's our initial sort of person. And then that kind of feeds the in-house team to do the actual mashups. Then from there, if we're still seeing success and things are moving in the right direction, we typically will either bring in another agency that is kind of more putting together concepts, kind of taking on that next role. We've worked with some brands. I work with HighScale.ai. They're sort of the sister company of Tube Science. For like problem solution brands, they've been really good for me because the volume they put out, they charge a percentage of spend model of 15%, and then it goes down to 12%. They've been really good for a brand that I work with that does problem solution, that it's pretty easy to build, and they're just all volume play, right? Like they'll get me, no joke, 300 to 400 assets a month, and they'll all be different. So that's pretty impressive.
Dave, at what size? So like if we're kind of talking, right, I'm just going to reel you back a bunch of these because I'm honestly so curious on how you think, because I think we're trying to do this on our own. I think there's a bunch of other brand creators or brand owners that are trying to do this at the same time. So you're hiring a video editor, you're hiring either like a freelancer or an agency to help kind of script, get the initial ads rolling. You're likely starting with static, some lightweight videos, which are, like you said, coming from archive, coming from videos that they have, coming from customer testimonials, like lightweight or even lightweight UGC, $200 a video type of thing. Once you're finding winners, then you're starting to scale up the ad account. Maybe they're spending 10K a day, 250K a day at this point. Is that kind of the realm where then you start to bring
So typically, if I'm cracking 8 to 10K a day consistently profitable, and I'm talking like the things are moving in the right direction in a very positive way, I'll bring in some like a high scale. It's like, okay, like we need volume now to like take this to the next level. I would not bring in a high scale if you're spending like 3 or 4K a day. Like it just doesn't make sense. Like it really is, when you're really finding product market fit on Meta, you kind of feel like you know where things are heading. Bring in someone like that. That's just a volume play. That's sort of been like that next iteration from there. When I find, so say that's going well, right? So we're getting a performance agency over here. We're making sure the ad naming conventions are tracking so that you know that agency is this. I always recommend having a table set up with each agency on how they're doing. One thing I actually like to do is have a report card that I like to send back to different agencies at times. For some brands that I work with, I'll actually send like a report. Hey, this agency is doing this. This agency's over here. Here's how we should kind of play a little bit of like, all right, let's get rid of these guys. They just aren't hitting what we need to, and we'll put more in there. So that's sort of that initial phase. From there, that's when I start going, okay, the volume game is going well, but the thing that we're missing is that next level of content, which is sort of the diversity, because a high scale is going to get you a lot of sort of the same things, right? That's like, they're going to be really good at that. You got your UGC, and then you got your sort of like your problem solution hook kind of videos, but that's not getting the sort of like, hey, I want podcast ads, or I want street style interviews, or I want this, and then I also want some more brand heavy videos. That's when I actually will start going to different contractors that I know that can specialize in those things, and I'll be like, hey, I want to get just a set 30 videos from you. That's going to cover 3 months of advertising, right? Like I'm just going to be like, that's just to get diversity in there without like overwhelming the account with 150 street style interviews. It's like, all right, like there's one agency we work with that will get me 30 videos for like 3K or 4K, right? And it's like, it's all that kind of style video. It's like a little bit different. If I put all those in the ad account, like right away, it's just gonna overwhelm the ad account. So it's like, it's just a way for me to get
So,
product diversity in there.
yep. So, okay. The way that I'm kind of like breaking this down is just by like daily spend or monthly spend. I think that's a very helpful way for a brand owner to be like,
Yeah.
this is kind of where I slot myself in at, where I'm at now and where I
Yeah.
want to get to. So that's kind of like 250K a month in ad spend on Meta. We're talking Meta for what it's worth,
Yep.
in case like that wasn't clear.
Yeah.
Kind of across the board. That's the majority of what we're likely talking about here. All the way up to probably $1 million a month, right? Is that kind of where
Yeah.
like this playbook that
Yeah.
you're saying, okay, now let's add more diverse stuff. Let's get the podcast.
Yeah.
Let's get these people talking on the street.
Yeah.
Let's try some more brand related. I honestly don't think we should talk much more beyond 1 million, because I think that the
No.
majority of people need more help on the, honestly, even up to 250K a month and spend, 30K a month to 250. I think a lot of these people that they're asking Andrew in his membership and asking like people on Twitter, what do I do between 30K to scale up to, 100K a month or 100 to 250? So
Yeah.
I think we should break that down more. Andrew, I can kick it over to you.
yeah.
But I would love
I
to
mean,
like focus on that segment.
One thing that I think is interesting, and Dave, I'd be curious your opinion about this, or Brad, even I'd be curious your take, is like thematically, one piece that I'm hearing from a ton of agency owners and the founders membership about is about that first hire. So like they have, the video editor, right? They're like a brand that's in-house, or an agency that's helping, scale up the brand. And they generally then have more creative, and like some of it has diversity, big air quotes of like what that means. But there seems to be two things that are happening. One is there's disorganization in reference to what and why in like, it's like target practice, but it's like spray shooting like everywhere. And then the other one is like,
Yeah.
there's not, and so to me, I feel like a project manager, a detail oriented person, is really almost like the hire that you want, and you can offshore some of these, 2 or 3 video editors, right, in South America or whatever. That seems to be a model that works better if you have someone that's like able to master the organization of all of it with intention. Because otherwise, yeah. So I know that's a problem. Like, we don't have to talk about how that's a problem because everybody knows it's a problem.
Mhm.
So like, how do you address that, Brad and Dave? Like, how do you guys see this being addressed properly? What's your
Yeah, I can quickly jump in, and then I'm super curious what you have to say, Dave. On our end, we the team structure, just to start there, looks like the progression was we started with the designer, and the media buyers just like had to learn the creative chops, because over the last several years it's become more and more apparent that we need diversity and scale of actual creative volume. And so for us, a few years ago, it looked like, okay, we have a handful of designers and we have media buyers, and the media buyers just like have to figure it out. Over the last several years, we've just continued to hire more of the creative strategy people that have basically enabled the media buyers to look in the account, understand what's going on, and then feed that to the creative strategists, who then can help scale out those ideas, because that's what they're doing all day, is looking at this, concepting it, figuring out what is the direction that I should actually go from a messaging standpoint. And I think like those people just kind of help coordinate literally that entire process for us. So for us, it's, yes, they're doing creative strategy, but they're also basically project managing everything from briefing through it's ready to go in the ad account. That's what it looks like from our end, at
Are
least.
they the ones giving feedback to the editors and like the designers then that are making the assets? The creative strategists are?
Yeah, if I did give like the exact workflow, it's basically like I'll do it on a weekly basis, because I think that's the simplest version of it. But on a weekly basis, the media buyer is basically saying, like you said earlier, Dave, they're building it into a sprint of, I need this, this, and
Yeah.
this. And we can talk about, well, how you define this, this, and this, if that's helpful. But I need these couple of things in this direction, and I want to talk about these different topics. The creative strategist is putting together a brief. The brief is going back to the media buyer saying, yes, looks good. That's going over to a designer. That the designer produces it, goes to the creative strategist. Creative strategist says, looks good. This is what I wanted. Media buyer, are you pumped about this or not? And then over to the client and into the ad account. That's kind of the flow. So yes, to
Yeah.
answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I like to look at it is, so the guy that is on my team, he's not a day-to-day media buyer. He has a creative background. He can pretty much shoot content. He has a music background. Like he's just kind of a creative person. And I just said to him, I was like, look, like all these companies we work with, like, yeah, a lot of them have some type of a creative strategist person, but what I'm finding more and more is that the person who's actually running the ad account and lives in it every day generally does better at knowing what to do next than even someone who's a creative strategist who's just looking at the creative, because there's so many elements outside of just, hey, this piece of creative worked, and reading the underlying metrics. So what we did was he now basically lives with me in the ad accounts. And like he uploads the ads. Him and I talk about decision making on a day-to-day basis. And then what he does is he uses motion and builds out these different reports based on what our objective is. And every like I said, he sends a deck to the client, either it be to the CMO, to the agencies, or whoever it is. And we basically say, here's the videos that you did. Here is the report card that we have on your assets. And then here's the direction we want you to go next based on what we are seeing in the ad account. So for example, if we start to see, and I'm just going to give you an example of this one, we work with, for one brand we work with, we have 5 different agencies. All 5 give us different styles of creative. None of them make the same style. One of them, their only job is TikTok shop. They send all of our content stuff to TikTok shops with we don't make money off TikTok shops. The brand does not make money because the margins just aren't great. We do it just to get the content. That's it. That's why we do it. And so that's their entire job, is to get the most authentic type of content from these creators on TikTok. So that agency gives us anywhere from 75 to 140-ish videos per month of just people talking about our product and however they want to talk about it. All walks of life. We got young, old, woman, man, different ethnicities. Just it's diverse, creative. And so what we do is we have a strategy where every week we take a batch of their creative, we upload it, and we'll upload it usually in our ABO creative testing ad sets. And then we will run that. At the same time, we'll run another agency that is only focused on a problem solution hook style video ad. And then we'll run those and basically launch all at the same time, same day. And then each 2-week window, we'll go back and say, all right, here's how each of them did. And then for the TikTok people, we approach them differently than we do the other agency that isn't going to be able to do that kind of content because that's not where their wheelhouse is. But we'll give everybody at the end of it, we'll always have key takeaways from all of the creative. So it's like, we found that this style person with this style that mentions something with these 3 elements in it is really key to success. And the way we find that is in the naming conventions, right? So people always laugh at my naming conventions because sometimes like our ad name is like, this is like really long.
You break the space.
It does help on motion though,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it
Like,
way easier.
Yeah, and that's why we do it.
And it's
So like, yeah, so it's like I'll have like benefit first, problem first, or I'll have like video opens with talking head, like it'll say talking head or POV. And so you're seeing all this stuff and you're mapping out, okay, this is actually working a lot better than I thought it did. So that's how we're going to mention it. And that's kind of how we're always doing the data dumps. But the key thing that you have to just make sure you do is you have to look back too. So not just look at each 2-week window. You have to go back and look from 4 weeks ago and see if there's any commonalities between those. And that's where I love using AI for. So what I'll do is I'll actually dump that doc in our AI, be like, all right, can you start mapping this together and give me like what shifted week over the time frame so that we can start to see, has there been any shifts? Primarily there isn't. Like that's the thing. It's like if you're really dialed in on creative diversity, you'll see that your spend is going across multiple ad sets where you're having not just one ad dominate, you're having multiple ads dominate. And that's when you know things are moving in the right direction on creative diversity. Is if you just have one ad in each ad set, or you launch a campaign, an ASC campaign, and you have one ad get, $10,000 a day in spend and everything else get $10. Like, well, you're really not diverse at all. You might have found one ad and just went with it. And that's when that's when things actually get in trouble, because once that ad fatigue, suddenly you're basically refreshing your account again.
So I have to call out one thing that you said, David, that I think is like very relevant, especially for smaller brands is, and this just happened to us internally for one of the brands that we own, is our CS was basically giving the direction more than our head of growth was giving direction, who's in the ad account pushing the deliveries. And what ended up happening is all of our ads started to look exactly the same. Like they just kept going in. And we're like, hey, why is performance starting to fall off? Well, if you actually go look, all of the ads look fundamentally the same. We're using the same 3 hooks in headlines and statics that we're using in videos, that we're using everything else. So yeah, once that starts to fall off, if that's like a seasonal concept or a theme to that ad that starts to like taper, if that's your whole leverage point, you're doomed. So yeah, I think like the point of diversity, naming conventions is huge for us. Like one thing that we started doing when we brought in our first like head of performance creative was like basically naming every single batch. Every single batch, which goes out every week, is the name of the creative strategist, and then there's like a batch number. So like the creative strategist initials 001. So now we can literally look every week what was launched, what was put into editing, what was actually launched that week, what batch is actually standing out, and then the next part is the theme of that batch. To your point, like once you're a bigger brand, you can start hiring different agencies, you can start hiring more partners to kind of like get that diversity. But I think if you're a small brand, just like treating them as batches every week and say, okay, batch for this week is going to be a theme that's around testimonials. Next week, it's going to be a comparison thing. Maybe then we're going to loop in some humor the following week, or then we're going to try and do a podcast concept. I think like that's where a lot of smaller brands struggle with the diversity thought process, where they're just like, do I need more videos? Do I need this TikTok thing?
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you know? I mean, I have my own opinion on this, but like that's one thing that like when we're talking to a brand, it's like how do you know? And my answer is always you have to basically anticipate that you need to have 20 to 30% of your creative always being on just absurdly out there concepts all the time. Because otherwise you're going to over refine what you said. But I don't know
like,
if you guys think that's a bad answer or not.
I think someone like David is going to have a higher hit rate than most people. So his perspective is probably a little unique. I think what I like to say is like, we're going to take probably 100 shots at goal, and we're going to probably get one of them to be like a full standout ad that really allows the ad account to break through. And that's why we try all these different things. I think that there's a fundamental, like there's a couple different types of ads or formats of ads that generally we kind of have a good idea like that could work. But at the end of the day, like it usually comes down to a sequence of events. And this is where the volume thing comes into play. When people say, hey, you need more volume, I need more ads. Media buyers are always saying, hey, I need more ads, I need more ads, I need more ads. Well, what does that actually mean? I think it means more new shots at goal, different themes, different types of concepts. But anyways, David, I'm curious how you think about that. Like,
Yeah, I would say the way that I would look at it, twofold. I'm not a person that likes to do the crazy stuff, frankly. What I found when it comes to like doing crazy content and crazy hooks is that you get a lot of look-see-loos and not a lot of solid conversion. I find that like the whole like there's a lot of agencies out there that will like, all right, blow a bubble, and that's your hook. It's like what? You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of like okay. The way that I like to approach it is that I want to be as authentic to the brand as well as to the problem or the product as humanly possible. If it's a brand that is a lot funner, yeah, sure, let's take wild swings. But if it's a problem solution or apparel is a big one, right? Apparel's the one where you really can't get away with it. Like apparel is the one where it's like, show me the product and how it looks on you, and that's it. I don't need to know anything else, right? If it's I work with a lot in like CPG and like pregnancy, baby, all those kind of worlds. Like that's something that I've always worked on. Footwear, that's very much driven where it's like footwear. You're focusing on comfort, 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 comfort. Like that's what people care about. And so I'm always just going like, all right, what is the key call outs for this product problem solution? Is the problem, is it product, like product A versus product B? And then this is why ours is better. Is it a POV version? Is it all these things? But I still go back to the same thing. If you're filming with an iPhone and it's the same kind of cuts, to Meta's eyes, it's the same creative. It really is like, it's not so much that's the concept of the video, it's the way it's shot is more than anything else is where you look at this. So if it's just like, if it's like, if all I'm getting is a bunch of women talking to the camera, in Meta's eyes, it's the same thing. It's like there's nothing different about each of them, even if it's like a completely different creator. So instead, you're like, all right, I need to batch this to say, all right, I'm gonna get a creator to do this, this, and this. It's 3 different places, 3 different styles of things, and they're all gonna be approaching this from a different angle of it. So, does that make sense? What I'm saying?
It does. Yeah,
And the best way
totally.
and the best way of saying it is this is how I go with this. I like to go on Instagram Reels and TikTok and just sift through, just go really fast. Whenever something catches my eye, I stop and I go, okay, how can I turn that into an app? That's what I do.
Yep.
So I'll save them. I'll save it. I'll save it. All right, that's a cool concept. I'm gonna turn that into an app. Oh, that's awesome. And then what happens is I'm just sending stuff to the guy that works for me at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, do this. But it's because it's always different. It's always something new. And since Meta's Andromedia thing and just kind of where they're heading has really come into fruition, I'm noticing that creative testing has become a lot harder. I don't know if you've noticed this, but hit rates have become less like it's actually a lot harder to prove the system and the model right, because it does feel that if Meta doesn't like that one concept and you make more versions of it, Meta goes, no, I don't like it. I remembered it from last time. I don't like it. And you're like, okay, so that kind of feels like iteration. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like iterations have basically stopped working for me.
I want to drill back on a couple points that you said. One was like the crazy hook stuff. So
Yeah,
we dabbled with this with Hollow in Q4, and it does its job with garnering attention, but does it work that much better? Very hard to say. It definitely doesn't hold for a long period of time, right? So like my creative strategist had me like taking all these like wild TikToks where people are like falling and like whatever, all this crazy stuff, right? As the hooks for these videos to sell alpaca socks, right? Which is kind of feels out of the blue and doesn't feel to the brand's like main thesis, like you were saying. Anyways, it kind of worked, but none of them held in Q1. So it was more just like get the quick attention and then talk about the big sale. And like, okay, if that's the goal is like get the attention really fast and then push the sale during a high peak purchase period, sure, that maybe can work then. But I think from like an evergreen standpoint, it's not something that a lot of brands should put much attention into. I agree with you there that the craziness is like a short-lived kind of win. And it only works when there's a high buyer intent and or there's like some reason that they really should go and purchase right now. The other thing that you were talking about was at the end there, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, all good. I'm really curious about like the strategy piece in general, right? So David, you're saying kind of there's a lot of options and ways that you can go. You can work with tons of agencies and tons of different types of people, and they specialize in focusing on different types of creative. How are you giving them directive, or how are you guys deciding internally, like, this is what you should be talking about thematically? Like, let's use Hollow as an example, because Zach is here. We can give him free tips because he needs them. Like, if he's saying like, hey, we're gonna go talk to hunters. Like, I need you to make content about hunters specifically, and maybe you should talk about how it's great because it's going to keep your feet warm, it's going to be moisture wicking, etc. Are you giving that kind of directive with like, hey, here's kind of the theme to talk about, or are you just giving them the reins to drive?
So, like the creators?
Yeah,
So
creators, agencies, yeah.
Yeah. So I give loose examples of what I want, and I let them take the reins from them. If it's a new agency, I'm very much hand holding. But if it's an agency that we work with that knows the brand, I'm generally letting them guide. I'm just saying, hey, this is the direction I want you to steer this. Because ultimately, I think we're hiring them to be creative. I'd like them to have some free rein to do what they need to do. But there's agencies that I work with that I have to literally give them exactly what I want them to do, or else it goes off the deep end very fast. But they produce, so you're just like,
So
David, I remembered what I was going to ask. Sorry, real quick, Andrew. The hit rate component that you brought up, which is more around iterations aren't working as well now. Creative testing is getting a little bit harder. How do you address that? How do you address that? How are you thinking about that? Because normally you'd think, oh, if the hit rate is low, I need more volume. But
so
right. So where do we go?
So I'm always twofold. One is if I have an ad that works and it's starting to fatigue, I'm going to make other versions that are similar to that, but I'm not going to make the same ad. Essentially, like I'm not going to take that hook and just change the second half. I'm going to literally, hey, an ad about X is doing well. Therefore, okay, maybe it's the concept that's actually doing well. So I'm going to make more concepts around that story. It's just going to be different, right? And then from a concept of if an ad in a season doesn't work, that doesn't mean the ad failed entirely. It just means it didn't work in that particular season. And so I always will go back and make a note of like creative that I'm like, actually, I really like these ads. I'm going to go back and retest them in 6 months or 3 months or things like that. And oftentimes I actually see them perform in a different season for a variety of reasons. I don't know why.
A phrase that you used to use a lot, David, was like, "Is it in the zeitgeist?" This is like something that's like a David Herman like is always ring a bell with me for the last few years. Is like, is it in the zeitgeist? Is it relevant to what's happening now? I think that's your point, right? I think we make a lot of ads that we think are going to work, and it just isn't that time. Isn't that time of year? There's something weird going on in the world, like that. It's worth kind of revisiting at another point.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I'll give you a quick story for a brand that I work with, where our conversion rate has just been dreadful the last couple weeks. Naturally, right? It's a product that you don't need it. It's a product that you're like, it'd be fun to have, or it'd be cool to try. I changed all of our product messaging in the last 3 days. Literally, I concepted all new videos. I said, you know what? We're gonna play into the current environment that's playing out on Facebook. We're not gonna talk political, but we're gonna play into the environment of how people are feeling, and we're gonna give them an emotional emotional escape. That's where we're going. Well, we launched the ads, and our conversion rates basically went from it was like a last click 0.8% to it's like a 1.62 or something today or something like that. Because like it's just it's a different element. And being able to, I think that's the biggest thing about these brands is being able to be super quick at knowing when know when like I think I said in your tweet, right? Know when to hold them and know when to fold them. There's times when you're like, you know what, this ain't working, and I know within a day if it's not going to work. Like I can tell you within a day because like you live and breathe these ad accounts, and you're like, nope, nope, that's not going to work.
Absolutely.
And being able to know to cut it, the hardest part of that is when you're working with these agencies. They're like, well, we just spent all this time making this stuff. You're going to shut it off after a day. Yes, I am. And you need to know, like the brands need to, like they need to know that that's how you're going to act. But then you're always like, no, we're going to go back and test it. This isn't the right time for that. Secondly, to add to that, we always talk about creative diversity as a creative, but we don't talk about diversity when it comes to the landing page. And I think there's also an element where I've seen literally creative that hasn't worked on Meta because it's gone to the wrong landing page. I'll change the landing page and suddenly it gets spent and starts to work. You're like, okay, the estimated action was just somehow misaligned there, and now it's working. So oftentimes I'm always running like a CBO of our best performing creative against all of our landing pages and just letting the system figure it out. And whichever one it aligns to, I just lean into that and go. That's a fun strategy if you're just sitting on tons of landing pages to try as well.
So one thing I'm curious about is, so you go with a system, you sit down, there's a brand that's listening to this. They have experimented with creative diversity. They're trying things that are in the zeitgeist. They're doing what we're talking about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are successful, brands, agencies that do creative, or agencies that do creative and media buying, what are they doing in terms of regular assessment? And how are you guys doing this to build in a way that you are continually improving and identifying and moving things along? Like, you know, the typical system I hear is like, okay, we go look last 7, we look at what's hit based on hook rate, based on thumb stop, based on, you know, whatever, right? And, you know, I'm sure there's all these people that are going to be like, you know, that metric's worthless or whatever the frick people whatever. There's a lot of, don't at me with that shit. I'm trying to make a point, which is that like, what are, you know, you're looking at that. We look last 7, we go and continue to iterate. Those that are best in class right now at this, what are they doing? How are they assessing it? Are they assessing it the same way and they're just better at creating? That's because we want a brand to come into this and listen to this, say like, all right, we need to up our shit. This is what we need to do.
I think you just need to create actual consistency and the way that you do the work. And I think it comes down to intentionality, right? So this is a word I keep telling my team: intentionality, intentionality, intentionality. It's so easy to get caught up in the moment, see a post on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and it's like, hey, this new creative is like crushing, or this is a new static that we made, and you just like send it, and you're like, oh, we have to copy this right away. This is such a good idea. I think a lot of it comes down to setting like a consistent output pipeline, which is how we think about it. This is how many creatives we're going to make per week, statics, videos. What can I do based on my budget? If you're a tiny brand, even doing 10K a month, you can set that baseline. Setting the baseline feels really good. And then basically it's okay, if I'm going to run 10 new statics a week, 3 new videos a week, if I'm a small brand. Obviously these numbers scale up infinitely as you can spend more on your a larger revenue business. Then it's using a tool or something that can make your life easier. For us, it's Motion. We use it at Homestead. I know Brad uses it, David uses it, Andrew uses it. It's a great tool for this. And like part of what Motion's done and why we like it is it's simplified a lot of these things. If you're using naming conventions like David Herman mentioned earlier, is you can go in, you can look at tags, you can look at themes of ads that you're running, like I mentioned. And on a weekly basis, you can go back and audit that and say, hey, what is working this week? What didn't work this week? And what are the things that I want to go try next? So for me, that's like just starting with the baseline of saying, here's how much we're going to make every week. We're going to check it the same day every week, and then we're going to determine what we're going to make the next week. I think just like starting with that baseline and doing that consistently every week is how you actually stack wins. Otherwise, you're just manic. Like I see so many brand owners that are just constantly like launching ads at different times of the day, nights, weekends, all over the place.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just like it's just there's no way the
Yeah.
algorithm can get actual momentum when you're just doing manic decisions constantly versus just saying, okay, we're going to be strategic about this, intentional about this. We're going to try one theme this week and not giving up on that and saying, okay, we're going to run it through. We're going to put enough spend to this to actually prove, do these ads work or do they not work? Why? Or yes, great. Let's figure out why. If not, let's figure out why and go do something else different next week.
Yeah.
I think it's just like comes down to that intentionality. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna start with that baseline, and Dave, I'll let you rip.
No, I was going to say sort of similar thing. I think that number one, in my opinion, um, and this might sound, I'll just say it anyway. Um, I think you need to listen to less people.
Yeah.
Word.
Honestly,
Good job. There it is. There it is.
sorry, but
Yes.
but like I get so many people hitting me up that are operators and brand owners that are like, oh, I heard on this podcast this, but then this podcast said this. Is like, no, stick with the groups that you're like, you know what, I'm aligning with that tribe. Like that's the group that I'm going to listen to for this, or that's for this. And I think like we're drowning in information. We are
Yep.
drowning in it. And I'm on record. Like I don't really I don't have time to do and read and do all the content. It's like I just get so overwhelmed with it all. Where it's like I'll pop in and listen to this podcast or this video or this video. Stick with your tribe. Stick with it. Like if you're a media buyer, like this is probably a good podcast to listen to. If you're a media buyer, the marketing operator podcast is a good one to listen to. You probably don't need to listen to operators podcast or sure, like dive in, but like we are just drowning in content. And what ends up happening is you get so overwhelmed because you're getting so much thrown at you, and then what happens is this new person will say this, and suddenly your brain goes there. It's like I actually agree with you, Zach. Like stick with the fundamentals. Like all right, this week our whole concept is we are going to make the best problem solution ads for our product, and we're not going to do anything else. Like that's how our focus is going to be right now. We're going to own it. We're going to learn how it works. We're going to see, hey, can we make a bunch of diverse creative off of this? And if I can start there and start to build that learning off of just one concept and go, then start adding on more and then more and more. But like, don't think you're just going to throw everything out there out of the gate, because you're just going to get overwhelmed and then you're not going to know where to go because you're just going everywhere.
Well, I think you spread yourself too thin, and then the quality of the work that you're trying to do or the type of ads you're trying to launch just like weaken, right? Because then you're just doing the same thing over and over again without even realizing it. So I think slowing down and taking larger swings at this is in setting a pace and saying, hey, I'm okay with only launching this many ads. I see this brand saying they're launching 1,000 ads a month. You don't have to do that. Like build into build stack wins and build into it. And I think the biggest thing is some people, like you said, there's so much noise that they get overwhelmed. They're just constantly trying to do the next thing that they can never get in a rhythm.
Certainly
and
it's a big
for
narrative
us, that's
about volume. You know what I mean? Like it's oh, you need as much as you possibly can, which I think to going back to all the way to the beginning of David's tweet, is talking about not just volume, but it's talking about speed. And I think that those are actually different things. Like I think you
Yeah.
can certainly create things that are going to be culturally relevant. That's a good idea, and you can get them done quickly, but it doesn't mean you need a billion of them. And actually,
No.
the more it's kind of goes back to, remember the days when we would talk about ad creative and testing it. I remember, David, in like our original scaling course we did like 10 million years ago, it was actually 6 years ago, by the way, that it got released. But
Wow.
one of the things we talked about is like, don't just change the image of somebody wearing a blue hat and then change it to like a green hat. Like it's not enough,
Yeah.
and I think that's an underlying concept. And I think we know that, but yes, I completely agree with you about overwhelm of information, which is something, we try to distill for you in the Foxwell Founders membership, which there's my ad right there. I'll just leave it there.
Well, I think what you guys are saying is like you can set a plan for the month and you can deviate within that plan, but it kind of like within these bars, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about this topic for the next 30 days. Like the way that I think about, I'd actually love for you guys to just like tear this apart if you don't agree with this. But the way that we've been kind of thinking about this recently is like, let's set kind of the percentages of what we want to talk about this month. So we know that our product solves these 3 problems. We know that this one is taking up the majority of the spend right now. So we want to go deeper into that. So we're going to put 50% of our effort, and maybe not everybody has to quantify it, but like we're going to put 50% of our effort into solving this angle or this problem, or we call them pillars, and then 25% into the 2 other ones. And then within that, it's okay, I can break those angles down further. And when I look at that, okay, I've got 2 videos, but I'm mostly leveraged into statics. And it's just kind of like bringing that down and setting the strategy for the month with like, to Zach's point, I'm defining the output. I'm defining kind of like, these are the core pillars that I want to hit on. And then how I actually approach that message is, okay, I'm going to do statics, I'm going to do videos, but within that, it's the podcast, blah, 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 blah. And you set that for the month, and on a week-to-week basis, if you see something in the zeitgeist, as you guys have been referring to, it's like you can do a concept around that. If you can get something cranked out, you can still do that, but you're not like completely deviating away from your strategy. Because as you start to do that, then you don't know if your strategy ever worked because you just didn't stick to it long enough to know. And I think that's kind of what you guys are loosely referencing, is like if you just abandon things weeks after it starts because you heard something new, it's like you never really gave yourself a chance to know if your strategy was going to work to begin with.
Yeah, it's true. And I think we're all, where I think a lot of people's heads are at right now is, I mean, I think we can all agree, like Meta's performance, I would say over the past month and a half has been a roller coaster. And like, it's like you're constantly coming up with new ideas, new things, and then you find something that works. You do find something that works for a week and you're like, great, it's working. We unlocked it. And then the next week, nope. And this is a really, like, we can examine that this is a tough time. This is not normal behavior that we are seeing in a typical thing. And like, it's here's how I always look at it. And I think I called Andrew yesterday because I was like, I just need a gut check from you. Like, I get hit up. I know things are bad when I'm getting hit up by so many people at the same time. And I would say, like, it ebbs and flows in a given year, right? And it's like last month it just ramped up of like brands like, hey, are you busy? It's like, okay, so there's definitely there's something going on. And you're just like, I mean, it's not, I always want to stress, it's like you're when you have those seasons of sort of like the performance roller coaster season, the last thing you should do is add more complexity to it. It's like, go back, strip things down, read the room. And so whatever your products are, if it's selling socks, everybody needs socks. People need socks all year, right? But now you're competing in the market with Costco because somebody's probably trying to save money, and the Puma socks at Costco don't cost a lot of money. And it's like, go for that, right? Like, see, that's your competition now, is Costco or whatever it may be. And like, that's where my brain goes whenever I'm working with brands. It's like, okay, my consumer in this very moment is likely 35 to 45-year-old female, because that's the data's telling me, 35 to 45-year-old females that are living in these 5 areas. Okay, in those 5 areas, based on what's happening here, my feeling is that this is kind of what they're thinking about on a daily basis. They're heading into summer. There's a lot of uncertainty going on with their summer vacations. They're probably feeling a little depressed because things are getting more expensive. All right, how do I speak to them? And then I work from there. And I go, okay, this is my core focus. I have my always on campaigns, my always on activity that I know always seems to work. But I'm always in the back of my mind going like, all right, this is like a shifting time for people. And so then I go that route because I did a whole research a month ago in the Chat GPT's like deep research thing, where I literally grabbed every major brand that was marketing between 2006 to 2012. And I said, I want you to do a research project for me on how messaging shifted pre, during, and post 2008 recession. And it came back to me with some really relevant information. And what it basically said was like certain legacy brands focused on nostalgia because they knew that, hey, they're not going to change their prices because they can't. And then the brands that could change their prices, they focused on value and they upped their value. And so like, I'm like, okay. And then I start to examine the D2C brands I work with. And I'm like, okay, this brand has more of a legacy than this brand. And then I go start to like kind of move down from there. And then my messaging shifts based on that. So like, that's how I'm doing it. And then I go to the creative team and I say, all right, this is the angle I want to go with for the next 3 weeks. Continue to make your always on stuff, but I want you to add in 3 or 4 new videos around this concept. Now go. And then it's just always in the back of my mind of like the wild cards.
Yeah,
And,
I think,
and yeah.
I mean, I think speaking to, really what you're getting at is like speaking to emotion, which is so much of what this comes down to anyway, right? In terms of actually putting up creative tests, and like putting out things that are really going to hit. But go ahead and finish what you were going to say, Dave.
No, I mean, that's kind of it. It's just people forget that we're running ads in social environments, right? And so it feels kind of it like whether you like it or not, your video ad is going to be right above or below something Trump says, right? Right. And it's going to be like, oh, Trump's saying this today. Well, that's a pretty negative thing, or that's whatever. Right. And it's like, like that's where your ad is. And I bet you, if you guys all took your data and you looked at it based on negative news, I would be curious to see what your CTRs from Meta, from at least Facebook, are like when there's negative news versus positive news. Like, I bet you there's some, like, I've never done this. I don't know if this is true, but I bet you there's probably some correlation, at least from Facebook feed, that changes based on the behavior of how this stuff, because it just makes sense, right? If it's positive signal, it's great. And if it's negative signal, it's negative. And Instagram's why Instagram's the best, because it's not really like that, right? It's kind of, there's no news really there as much as it is on Facebook. So I digress, but I think that's how my biggest takeaway is: be social because you're in a social environment, and start thinking like that.
We've noticed that with all the tariff news and kind of just uncertainty that's happened even in the last, call it 30 days, the ads for us that stand out the most are founder ads. Like they're ads of a real person, kind of down to earth, grassroots talking. I mean, for us, we're made in America. So like there's half of the population that really resonates with that, like very, very deeply. And they believe that made in America is like the best way. And so I know that, a 50% of people scrolling Facebook are going to really resonate with that component. But then the other half is really going to resonate with the fact that I'm a real person talking about, hey, here are problems that I face and that I solved, and I've built a business, and we're supporting American jobs, and we're creating these opportunities and all this type of stuff, right? It's more of like a feel-good story component. And they're like, yeah, I would support this business because of that. So I think, like, to your point, there is a need to give almost the opposite reaction that they're getting to a lot of the kind of the negativeness that's happening in their feed right now. So to your point of like the storytelling that you were doing for one of the brands that you're working with, how do we help people get over this? How do we help people like think about it differently? So I think you can approach that no matter what you sell. I think it's just like thinking about how consumers are actually scrolling in the content that's around your ads. I think that's a really good call out.
And Zach is available for hire as a founder in ad videos.
Yeah, I will be your founder for $9 a month. No, David, really good stuff. I think that relevancy of thinking about how people are acting around your ads and how that impacts your ads is super relevant versus just saying, hey, let's go crazy direct response and just assume that this is going to keep working, um, and throwing sales in people's faces. It's like, maybe I don't even want to sell. I just want something that makes me feel a little bit better today.
David, thanks for joining us. I think, is there anything else on this topic that you want to be in the universe that you feel like we need to get into in reference to creative systems, creative diversity, creative velocity, creative teams?
I think that the number one thing when it comes to hiring a good team, a good agency to work with is somebody who takes your feedback and actually executes on it. I've worked with so many agencies that you'll give feedback to and they're like, nope, we're gonna do it our way. And you're like, it's not gonna work. Like it's a very it needs to be collaborative. And I think that's a really big thing is like trust your gut. Like at the end of the day, like you know, if you built a brand, you probably know your brand and you know your audience pretty good. I mean, at least I'd hope you do. So listen to it and be like, hey, no, that style ad is totally against my audience because I've worked with companies with it, an ad has sunk them because some agency said, nope, this is the way we're going to do it. This is the way we're going to market these people, and people hated it, right? And so you just have to make sure, like at the end of the day, you're the one in control, not the agency, and being able to like, yeah, like let them have their thing, but also be weary of like getting too derailed on some concept.
One last topic that I just want to hit on briefly, and I think it would be remiss not to talk about it, which everyone does, is all the AI creative stuff that's happening, right? Um, Motion is building tools. They've got these agents that are, I'm not sure, David, if you've messed around with them or not yet.
Mm-mm.
There's obviously a few of the tools that we referenced earlier in the episode, all the GPT stuff. How are you thinking about AI? How are you thinking about incorporating that into creative? How are you thinking about that for smaller brands? I think
Yeah,
my hopes of it is like it makes developing these things, all these complicated things that we're talking about, easier, and hopefully makes like costs go down for brands, and
yeah,
makes people at agencies' lives easier and less stressful and all that good stuff. So that's the vision that I'm trying to look at it, or like
yeah.
the scope that I'm trying to look at it through. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
The key thing that I believe AI is, it's not going to replace everybody. It's just going to take 40 to 60% of the work out of those people to let them focus on what they're good at. Say, for example, the image generation. I think that's an important tool that is being developed where a designer might not always be needed, but I think there's elements where designers will still be needed to come up with a new concept that no one else has come up with before, right? Like there's elements where photography is still going to be needed. Um, and so I think like leveraging those tools and sampling those tools is key. But also, like I'm already seeing AI videos left and right, and the FTC is getting more and more strict at this stuff, and like brands are gonna get sued, and it's just a matter of time before you cross that one person, and it's usually someone in California because California has the strictest stuff with this. That your ad served to them, and they are some ambulance chaser lawyer that's gonna go, well, that's an AI video that was no disclosure, lawsuit, and you don't have recourse. And so like be weary of just running AI videos left and right. Like there's still an element where that stuff is like the image stuff's fine. Like go for it. Like just knock yourself out. But also go like there's an element to where I always go, if it was this easy, I'm intrigued by these companies, but like I still have designers that I work with. I'm still having people that are shooting my content. I got a guy shooting content in Colombia today. So that's how
Yeah,
I
and
look at it. Like,
I think that's important for people to hear too, David, because obviously you're working on some of the biggest, highest spending brands that there are in D2C. And I think for them to know that you're not just like, oh, David knows all this crazy AI stuff that we're not doing, I think gives smaller brands and smaller agencies a little bit more peace that it's like,
yeah,
it's not the end all be all.
like, yeah, it's not the end all be all. And the AI stuff's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me. It's like every day there's something new that I need to learn, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna learn it. I'm gonna stick with like the things that I learned, and like I sample with prompting like every day, but I'm always asking. I don't know about you guys. Like I ask ChatGPT to make me the prompt. Like if I was going to try to do this, can you tell me what the prompt needs to be?
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
here you go. Right. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm so smart. I'm going to go post that on Twitter. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But
Prompt
like,
for me to say.
yeah. But it's that, like, just learn AI, but don't feel like you need to like quit your job for 6 weeks to go learn it. Like, dabble in the stuff every day. Play around with the AI generator, image generators, but don't fall into the FOMO of just, oh, everyone's gone this way. I need to too. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
everyone for listening to this episode. It's been a good one. It's been a long one, and we're excited that you came and joined us on episode 2 of the Scalability Podcast. Be remiss to say, please go and share this and rate our podcast so that we get to the top of the charts. That's important to us. And let us know feedback, as always, on what we can improve. You can always hit me up, andrew@foxwelldigital.com, as we talked about on episode 1. The other guys aren't going to share their information because they don't want the Chinese to have it, but Chinese have all my shit. So and everybody knows where to find David Herman, the man, the myth, the legend. Thanks, Dave, for being here.
You're welcome.